welcome to this week's ATL Home Market. I'm Ira Miskin. I'm the broker and team leader for your home sale guaranteed realty and the Miskin team, along with Stephanie Miskin, our co-team leader. And
Hello.
joining us again this week is Stephanie Gulley, who is one of our top team advisors that does a lot of really interesting work with folks, both older and younger, in helping them to buy and sell homes. And we've all experienced what we're going to be talking about this week, which is for people under 40, this is probably a new idea or a new experience. And for some of us who are older, and particularly folks that come from cultures outside of the United States more recently, it could be, European, or it could be Latin American, or it could be Asian. The idea of what is called multi-generational living has become, it was kind of a fad for a while, but it has really become a trend, both in Metro Atlanta and Georgia and around the United States. So we're going to explore the idea of multi-generational living and what that is, how that works, what it takes, and what the opportunities and advantages are, and how for some of it, it's just like how we grew up when we were kids. So that I think is going to be an interesting and actually a fun exercise, because it's something new, but it's something that affects people at pretty much any age in buying and selling homes. But before we jump into it, Stephanie M has some really interesting and fun things for us to explore and to do this coming week around Metro Atlanta that I think will just be fun and just a great thing to do. What you got, Stephanie?
Okie dokie. So the first thing I have is going to be occurring this weekend. And it's in Kennesaw, and it is the Pigs and Peaches Barbecue Festival. If you've never been to it, it's so much fun. It is in downtown Kennesaw on Main Street and all around there. It takes place on Friday and Saturday, and it runs until 10 o'clock. Fabulous barbecue, obviously. Unbelievable barbecue that you can try different types. There is live music. There are great crafts and people selling stuff, and also a kids zone. It's just lots of fun. It is free entry. There's parking all over the place down in downtown Kennesaw. So if you haven't been, check it out. Pigs and Peaches Barbecue Festival, and go hungry. All right. That's the first one. The second one that's coming up is called Summer Shade Festival, and that's going to be in Grant Park. But that's next weekend. That's August the 23rd to the 24th. Again, it is free to enter. There's going to be live music, an artist market, food, drinks, kids zone. And they're also going to have a run for the park, a 5K run, to help save some money for the park and upgrade the park some. So that's called the Summer Shade Festival in Grant Park in Atlanta next weekend. Okay, so now we're going to talk about things that are fun for the kids and also fun for the adults. And I'm talking about the TELUS Science Museum in Cartersville. If you've never been, it's worth the ride up there. If you live in Atlanta, it's probably an hour and a half ride from Atlanta. But they're going to be having a new exhibit. It is called Fury, the Power of Nature. And what this thing is, it's an interactive hands-on exhibit exploring natural disasters like hurricanes, volcanoes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, with immersive simulations that let the visitors actually feel and create these powerful phenomenons. So, for example, in a hurricane, you're going to stand in simulated wind. A tornado, you're going to get in the center of the tornado. An earthquake, you're going to feel the shake. So it should be very interesting for the kids and lots of fun. It's a very interesting museum if you've not been there. Again, it is called the TELUS Science Museum in Cartersville. Now, while you're going up to Cartersville, you should extend your visit and go over to Red Top Mountain State Park, which is right on Lake Allatoona. This is a great state park. I've talked about it early on when I was talking about state parks. It's swimming, water skiing, fishing, picnic shelters, and they have great overnight facilities. They have cottages, campgrounds, and they even have lakeside yurts. So I always think it's fun. Like if you can do something like that, go up to Cartersville, check out the museum, then go over to the state park, spend the next day just hanging out, going to the lake, boating, fishing. They also have tons and tons of trails that you can walk. They have 15 miles of trails through the forest. And they even have some easy trails that are on graveled, where they're accessible with wheelchairs and things like that, actually paved. And so, if you go and you have somebody who's, got some physical disabilities, you can go down the paved trail. And that, again, is Red Top Mountain State Park in Cartersville. Now, since we're going to be talking about multi-generational living, I wanted all you guys who are not over 50 to hear about this that exists for anybody over 50, and they're senior centers, and they're all over metropolitan Atlanta area and the suburbs. I'm going to mention 2 today, but they're all fairly similar. But there's one in Woodstock, and there's one in Alpharetta. And these facilities only cost $25 a year for membership. And if you're over 50, you can join. And the cool thing about it is, say you do have somebody living with you who's, over 50, these places offer all kinds of daily activities, all kinds of games like mahjong and billiards. There's arts and crafts that people can take part in, painting, dancing, wood carving. They have luncheons, festival, holiday luncheons and events, all kinds of stuff, and additional health screening that is available to anybody that's over 50. Also, they do day trips, which I think are real cool. They're going to do this one here in Woodstock is going to do a day trip to the Yellow Daisy Festival in Stone Mountain, which is coming up in September. And that's a fabulous art festival. And, you can, for $5, they'll drive you there. They'll drop you off. You can have a grand old time all day long looking at art. And, they have bowling outings. So bowling outings. If you didn't know about them, they exist. All you have to do is look up, senior centers in whatever city you live in. And I just think it's a great avenue for folks, if you are living in a multi-generational situation, for something to do and meet other folks your own age and just get out. So, oh yeah. And one more thing I almost forgot. This weekend and next weekend, I've been talking about this for weeks, is the All for Kids consignment sale. This week, it went on in Marietta, and the last day is Saturday. Next week, it's going to take place in Woodstock, and it will start, I think it's Wednesday is the first day, and go all the way through Saturday. So All for Kids consignment sale. I've been talking about it for weeks. Check it out because it's really great. And that's all I got today.
Well, and that's a lot.
It's a lot.
Now, pigs and peaches is always at the top of my list because probably from the standpoint of just eating good local food, which
and beer.
is beer, you can just go from vendor to vendor to vendor to vendor and eat until you pass out. And then when you wake up, get back up, drink some more beer, and then keep going, eat and eat and eat and eat and pass out.
It's a fun festival, and there's music, and there's, we went one year and I bought this really strange plant. It was called a pitcher plant. I don't know. Do you know what that is, Stephanie? A pitcher plant?
No, I do have a green thumb at all.
Oh, well, it's this very strange plant. It eats bugs. What are a carnivorous? It's a carnivorous plant, and I kept it alive for a pretty long time. It was called a pitcher plant, and then eventually it bit the dust. But it's a very odd looking plant.
So there you go. While I was eating, she was looking for bug
Yeah,
eating
I was
plants. So everybody eats.
to each his own, right?
Well, okay, whatever you want to eat. But let's in line with senior centers, meaning folks who are retired who are living with children. There's also children who are no longer children; they're adults, but the economics of the times that we live in really inhibit them from being able to either purchase a home on their own right now, and in some cases, because apartments and homes for rent are so expensive, it just makes sense for families to combine economics and families to combine interests, and to be able to use that as a way of being able to take care of lots of things that otherwise they might not been able to take care of, certainly economically. Um, uh, Stephanie, out there in the world, how often are you, as you're talking to buyers and homeowners, um, starting to see this as something that is coming up more frequently?
Pretty often. I have two people that I'm in conversation with right now where the mom is definitely wanting her kids who are adults. They're currently out of state. And so for it to make sense for them to move back home, to be closer to family, they're all willing to kind of go in together and purchase the house just because it's more economically beneficial for them.
And do they think about, what's it like to live with the kids again? What are they thinking?
Honestly, like I haven't heard them say like, "Oh, I don't want to live with my mom again." So I think, and I'm sure, I'm going to come across somebody who's like, I'll try not to kill her, but I need to buy a house. But as of yet, it seems like a pretty stable thing where it just makes sense. Like economically, financially, it makes sense for both parties. Mom is getting older, daughter is still younger. She has older kids. I mean, they are still her kids,
Mhm.
and they're not quite adults yet. But it makes sense for every single party, and every single party benefits. Mom can help with the kids whenever she needs to, or grandma in that situation. And then they can all have a house where they're living together and split the bills, and it makes sense for them.
And in times where, it feels like last week gas was $1.50 a gallon, and then 3 days ago it was $3 a gallon, and then it's $4 a gallon. Um, just driving to work means that you have that much less money every month to be able to pay for rent, to pay for food, for all of the things. And so shared households is a really interesting way to be able to resolve that problem. Um, I think Stephanie M. and I, because A, we're a little bit older, and because we both come from backgrounds uh, generationally where um, the multi-generational living was not a a fad or a trend. It was just how everybody lived. And I know, Steph, you've got a couple of good stories, particularly you're living with your grandmother. But I've got a quick one just to get started. Um, my mother was the youngest of four children. Her oldest brother was 25 years older than her.
Oh, wow.
And so when I was a kid, he and my Aunt Myra were as much grandparents to us as if we had grandparents. And they lived in a little one-bedroom apartment on one side of Brooklyn. And my mother, father, and sister and I lived in an even smaller one-bedroom apartment on another side of Brooklyn. And um, there was a new community that was being built out on the edge of Brooklyn. It's called Mill Basin. And they were building houses that had basements, which is unheard of. So when they went to see it, they realized that this basement was really a room that could have a kitchen. It had a bathroom. It had a room that could be a full bedroom, and it had a really nice big room that could be their living room, family room, dining room combination. Sounds very typical in houses today, but back in the day, that was something that was brand new. So they kicked in together. They raised enough money to be able to put a down payment on this house, and the down payment was 10%. The house, what we would call today a brick bungalow on a basement, was $29,000. So they had to come up basically with $3,000 to put down. And my aunt and uncle lived on the ground floor. They had their own entrance. They were able to park their car in the driveway and garage. My parents, my sister, and I each had bedrooms on the second floor. And that was multi-generational living. And there was no real thought about, oh, we're going to have to move in together, or how it was just as simple as, this makes complete sense. We're all family, and we can make this work really from the standpoint of both economics and also having the ability to just have that social. And it worked just fine. And it was typical and normal at the time and in the communities that we lived in. So if you have some examples too, don't you?
Yeah. Well, my father, my grandfather bought this house in Brooklyn. Okay. And back in, God knows, my father was born in the 1920s. So before that, probably early 1900s, my grandfather bought this 3-family house, it was called, in Brooklyn. And my father grew up in there. So there was 3 apartments. I mean, you'd go in and there was an apartment on the first floor, the second floor, and the third floor. Anyway, long story, my father lived in that house until he died. And he lived into his 80s. And growing up, my grandparents, different family members lived in different apartments over the years, but it was usually grandparents, aunts and uncles, and us. And so there was always lived in a multi-generational home until I moved out and got married. But, my one set of grandparents were in there, my other set of grandparents were in there. And it was really easy because everybody, yes, it was multi-generational, but everybody had their own apartment. Okay. So you really, you could come into the house and just go upstairs and not have to see grandma or your aunts or your uncles or your cousins. But, for holidays and things, everybody got together. And yeah, so that's basically how I grew up. And it was very comfortable. I mean, it was very nice having my grandparents there. I developed a really close relationship with my grandparents that I otherwise might not have had we not been so close.
So the social cultural, advantages to all of that, just because we've become so disconnected. And, Stephanie, you don't live with your parents, but, are parents or relatives in proximity, or are they farther away, when you got married and you moved?
Yeah, I mean, I did live with my parents for a while after I got married, because it just made sense for all of us to live together. I currently still have family members that are living multi-generational because, again, it just makes sense for them. They've gotten older. Not that they need taking care of, but it just is nice to have somebody that you live with. Either because my grandfather passed away a few years ago, and so my aunt, who was only married once, she's divorced. She's my grandmother and my aunt now live together, and I just sold their house, and they're in Florida, so they're living their best life in Florida in a 55 and older community. So even though they're in Florida, I mean, my parents live right down the road, and that's always been really important to me, is to be in close proximity to my parents, because, I have younger kids, and if I'm not available, and my husband's not available, they're next in line, and they've always been willing to do that. So,
Mhm. So you can see, even in current communities, even if you're not all living together, there are aspects of how families find ways to be able to um, uh, find mutually beneficial living environments, if you could say it that way. I feel so sociological. Mutually beneficial living environments to create this multi-generational living situation. Um, some of it certainly is, driven by family need. But again, as we started to talk about, um, a good part of it, at least the initial catalyst of it, is driven by the economics of what has happened, just in terms of the high cost of having a place to live. Um, when you're working with people, or when you're talking with prospective buyers or prospective home sellers, um, what thoughts do you give in either searching for a home for future vision of use, or for marketing a home that might have the advantage of being able to be used for multi-generational living, that has the space? Is that part of the conversation, and how you look at setting up homes for marketing?
oh, absolutely. Especially with younger buyers who have older parents, they're always very, I wouldn't say always, but there have been multiple conversations that I've had with buyers where they're like, well, I would like a finished basement for my parents eventually. And so you can kind of take that and, find that for them, but they can still use the space as putting like a short-term tenant in there. Obviously, if the HOA or the community allows it. So, there are benefits to having a space that is multi-generational, but it's not something that you need right now, but you're forward thinking and needing it later, but also still trying to do some sort of income producing type property.
So it's not only an immediate need, but people are now again beginning to think of the future. What
Exactly.
happens? I moved here. I grew up in Kansas, they might say.
Yeah.
My parents are still there, but I'm living here in Clarkston. But they're getting ready to retire in a year or two, and they don't really have any family left in Kansas. And if I buy this house that has this big old basement that's either finished or unfinished, um, we can use it now to have parties and get drunk.
It's one way to do it.
One way to do it, bring that beer back from the pigs and
That's right.
Peaches.
peaches.
Pigs and peaches.
Uh-huh. Um,
Well, that's what that client that I helped a couple of years ago did. Their mom lived in Arkansas and was getting older. I think their father had passed away, John and Rachel,
mhm.
and Rachel was now just had her second child. She had a little boy, and then she had another one. And their house was too small, and they called me up, and I sold them this house. The first house I sold them, they had just gotten married. Okay, now fast forward a couple of years. Now their second kid's on the way. It's too small. We got to sell it, and now you throw in the fact that they want mom to come and live with them. So anyway, I did. I found them a house, and it was a big ranch, and it needed some updating. It was in a fabulous school district on a full basement, and John ended up turning that whole bottom floor into an apartment for his mom, and a special, even put a new parking pad in there for her and everything, and they're still there and they're very happy. So yeah, I mean, it's more common now, I think, than it was 40 years ago. I think it was really common, 50 years ago, after World War II, and the baby boomer generation. I think it was really common, and I think then there was the trend of, it wasn't so common. People moved away for jobs and they weren't living so close to their family. And now it's coming back. So, yeah.
That, that was just sort of, a living fact of life, or it had that Eastern European culture, or Western European culture that it, brought it with it, maybe a generation or two before. Over the last 30 years or so, Atlanta has become an amazingly multicultural city. People from all over the world have found that living in the South, with the weather, with job opportunities, with living opportunities, is a wonderful place to move to or to emigrate to. And so the Latin American and Spanish speaking communities have grown up substantially.
Right.
Asian communities have
Asian
grown.
communities. Yep.
Uh, we have, like Josh, for example, has for the last 7, 8, 9 years worked very steadily with folks that come from various countries in Africa. They come here for the education, they come here for the jobs, whatever the ethnicity is. And they come and they realize what an amazing place living in communities and areas like Metro Atlanta is. And they stay, but they bring with them that same sense of multicultural family existence. And so we now have culturally a broad range of people who just have that as a natural part of their existence, just as it was when you had people that were making the great immigration moves into the United States around, the beginning of the 1900s, from the 1900s to maybe the beginning of World War II, who are now, grown up, elderly, with children and grandchildren, doing that. The culture of it is important. But then you guys run into folks where there's just like, emotional and social reasons for wanting, to be able to live generationally. As Stephanie, you were talking about your own family member who, aunt and grandmother, who found a way to be able to go ahead and do that sort of a thing. Call me back later. Thank you. What else are you seeing with folks that are thinking, and look at it both ways, both from the standpoint of adult children who now are moving back in with their parents, and senior adult parents or other family members who are making a route to move back in with their children. You see both ways, and how does that kind of play out?
Yeah, I think they mostly, or I wouldn't say mostly, but I think there is an emotional connection too, because from what I've seen, there's children involved, or a lot of times there are children involved where, mom and dad have full-time jobs. Maybe their parents are retired. And so they move back in to just simply help with the kids, so that, mom and dad can focus on their careers. So obviously still be there for their kids, but, to help with the kids and the family. But I've also seen, I did have one client that, she did buy a house that had a full finished basement, but it was for her son to go off to college, to where he had a place to come back to in between semesters when he had to move out of his dorm. So there's also, kids move out, but then they move back, for college reasons, and they're still pretty reasonably young, but then they have like that full basement space to go, so that it doesn't feel like they're really living with their parents too.
So teen suites become in-law suites.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when you think about it though, if a kid goes to college, gets out and gets their first job, rents are ridiculously high. They don't have any
Yes.
money saved usually to buy a house. So, it really does, from an economic standpoint, make a make a big difference if you can provide that for a young person just out of college to like kind of, get on their feet, because just the cost of living and rent, it's not even rent, just rent. It's just the cost of living.
Mhm.
It really would help somebody just out of college out a lot.
Mhm. Yeah.
And and young families as well.
Right. Right.
Because a lot of times, when you're just going into a rental situation and you have children, particularly children who are school age, um, you don't have as many choices about schools, the type of schools available, the quality of schools in a community that are available, because you're to the extent that you're limited by what you can afford to pay in order to have that living facility, that rent. Um, you've got choices that don't always fit with what it is that you want for your family.
Mhm.
So when you combine that way, you can not only get a living situation that makes sense, but a community situation that makes sense, which is, um, sort of the next generation of living, because we've had and we still have, right? The 55 plus senior adult communities for, folks that want to live on their own, but they don't want to have all the kids around. And there's lots of those kind of communities around that are being built, aren't there?
Mhm. Yeah, there's 2 out where I'm at. One is, well, actually, there's maybe 3 within maybe like a 5 to 10-mile radius. So it's more and more, evolving for these older communities. They're popping up. They're, single ranch style homes and, easy access for people who are older, wheelchair, all that other stuff. So yeah, they're popping up everywhere.
And those are for folks who want to live in an environment where everybody is the same. Um,
Mhm.
you know, they're retired or semi-retired, and they want people to be able to participate in activities, and their grandkids can come and visit once a year. But and there's plenty of folks that like it that way, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's great.
Yep.
There's tons of them, and we just visited a friend of ours who moved to one, and it's either for you or it's not. I mean, you're either gonna go to a place like that and you're going to embrace it and love it and say, wow, there's all this stuff to do, there's all this activity that, or you're going to go and you're going to say like, oh, there are no little kids, it feels a little weird being around everybody the same age. So you
Mhm.
gotta it's for some people, and that's why there's a lot of them, and other people are just like, this doesn't feel right. So
Yeah.
I always say, go check it out. Check it out, and see if that is for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, that's something that began as a trend about 20, 25 years ago. Now there are huge communities all over the country that are
Right.
aimed at what they call 55 plus or senior adult communities. But what's beginning to happen is a number of developers and architects are developing communities with the whole concept of multi generational living in mind. They're actually designing homes that have specific physical qualities to them in communities where the house can accommodate multiple families, multiple generations of families, and still have all of the activity and comfort. Have you bumped into any of those communities yet in your travels of showing houses to buyers?
I haven't, like, specifically neighborhoods geared towards multi-generational. I mean, where I'm at, there's a ton of neighborhoods with finished basements, like, that's, like, the new thing anyways. So but I don't think they're necessarily taking the spin of, it being multi-generational. But, I mean, I've seen multiple houses with finished basements, and, I mean, a lot of them are a lot nicer than an apartment, I mean, honestly. So, but I mean, geared specifically towards multi-generational, I have not come across that yet, but I'm, very excited to be able to to tour one of those neighborhoods.
Well,
You would think that, I don't know, this is just I'm just speculating, but inner cities, New York, Chicago, the suburbs of, New York with the boroughs, Brooklyn, Queens, inner city Chicago, all those houses were built, if you want to call it multi-generational, but they were multi-family houses. They were 2 or 3 apartments typically. There was a first floor apartment, second floor apartment, third floor apartment, and they tended to be mostly inner city type living. And I don't, it seems like that should translate to the suburbs, because it would make more sense. It would make more sense to build a structure that had 2 apartments in it and call it multi-generational, or 3 apartments in it. But I, like Stephanie G, have not seen many of those outside of inner city living.
Yeah,
There are in Atlanta, but there's not outside of the city that I've seen.
Any that I've seen have been like a duplex or a triplex, where it's not specific to multi-generational. Sure, you could, obviously buy that for the whole purpose of it being multi-generational. But most of them that are out where I'm at, and, in the suburbs, they're, it's just 2 different families with no relationship whatsoever.
Yeah, right.
Well, there are a couple of builders, and I think we're going to periodically re-explore this topic, because it is a growing trend that more and more people are beginning to take advantage of. There's one particular builder that I began to explore, look at some of the homes that they're designing in communities. They're called Curly Family Homes. And when they do the architectural design for homes, they build in elements into the homes that, they just, they work if it's just one family living there, but they absolutely work if there's multiple families. So they have things like there's separate entrances.
Right.
Okay? Which, again, growing up in the inner cities in New York City, there were plenty of buildings and apartments and duplexes and what we call triplexes, either all in the same building or attached, that were really one living space with 2 apartments with separate entrances. So it's not like, oh, that's amazing, but it's not something that's typical that you would see in a typical single family home. They have multiple kitchens or kitchenettes. In some configurations where it might be just a single parent and a lily parent, and having a separate floor may not work for them. They're building houses that have 2 complete master suites all on the same floor, extended ranches, so that there's plenty of space between the families, but there's a level of comfort, and there's also that central unit, those kitchens and those kind of things. And just the physical, layout of the homes, not as many steps, more accessible for seniors and so on. Just, the kinds of things that would make sense to put several generations of folks living together into a building. And they're actually designing communities like that. I think that's something that would be fun to hunt up and to actually go and take a look at and see, what are these houses and what are the neighborhoods, the communities looking like?
Right.
Yeah.
If you were going to build a community like that, what around you, in the community and surrounding in the area would be the kinds of things you think that would be useful and attractive to have multi-generational families living together?
Well, one thing I would think that the community would have is bingo. I mean, everybody loves bingo, and you can,
That's right.
you can just go play bingo.
A clubhouse.
That's right. I mean, There's one thing that I know, like, specifically about my grandma is she likes to stay busy. She likes to keep her mind occupied. She's not one of those that can just sit at the house and do nothing. And
Right.
so her biggest thing for moving to Florida was being in a community that offered, a bingo, game night, there's a restaurant in the community that she lives, and she just has a ton of friends down there. And so, I think that's important is, find a community that, that has a lot of stuff going on. So, mom in the basement isn't up your butt the whole day and, asking you, what are you making for dinner? This floor isn't clean. You know what I mean? Because that can get stressful. So it's like, okay, mom, go play bingo. I got it tonight.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, mom needs her own life. Mom needs her own things that
Yeah.
feed mom besides just, living around her kids or her grandkids,
Yeah. Yeah.
Bluey can get old pretty quick. you know.
Yes, it can. As cute as Bluey is, yes, it can get old very
Yes,
quick.
I'm sure you know who Bluey is. So yes, I mean, just because you're and they consider like 50 plus, I mean, 50 plus is still young. You're still able to do a whole bunch of stuff. It's not like you're, 88 and failing health. So yeah, it would need a plethora of things that would take care of the younger generation. So there could be swim meets and then,
Yep.
but then there would also be stuff for the older generation to take part in, like she said, like bingo or art classes. So it would have to be a sort of a combination of stuff that would suit everybody. I would think that would make it a comfortable living situation. And that's why, inner city living had all that stuff, right? I
Mhm.
mean, you it was all there. You could just take part of whatever it was that you wanted to.
Yeah.
But if you were building it out here, you'd have to encompass that.
Mhm.
Well, and so, you know, um, like knowing where these senior centers that are blossoming all over the place that have all of these activities where people of age can get together.
Right.
Um, so knowing that there are those kinds of places that people can go to in the community, also having community activities inside the neighborhood of the subdivision itself
Right.
is what you mentioned. Um, Shopping, I think, because you know we could. There was a little shopping center in the community where my parents and my aunt and uncle bought their house. You could drive to it, but you could also walk to it. And it
Mhm.
had a supermarket, and it had a bunch of small shops. And so shopping, and the convenience of being able to go and, pick up dinner, um, those sorts of things, so that both families as a whole and people of different generations would have the kind of entertainment or shopping or dinner activities that are within close proximity to where you're living, so that you don't have to drive 20 minutes to go to the supermarket. And there are, multiple choices about where you could go for a quick dinner. Wendy's not inclusive. Right? So,
Right.
um, and, if, and then there are folks who um, they have a combined vision of living, and it's not necessarily living in a community. They buy a house, and they buy a house on maybe 2 acres of land,
Right.
and they do something, Stephanie, that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It's kind of a new phenomenon, but it is becoming more and more and more prevalent in
Right.
communities.
Yeah. So a lot of times people will say, "Well, I want to buy a line. I want to buy land, and I want to build like a family compound kind of thing." And one of the things that besides what we've just talked about, are tiny houses. So you could have an acre or two of land And if zoning permitted and you'd want to make sure before you did all of this stuff, you could put up a tiny house, and you could put up a tiny house for anywhere from, depending upon whether you were going to build it yourself, get the plans and build it yourself for like $30,000, up to getting an already custom made tiny house, a modular type tiny house, which is all built in the factory, and then they come to your land in their boxes and they put the house together on your land completely finished for 100 and a quarter, which is still not a lot of money in today's market. So if, for argument's sake, if you did buy and you wanted to make a compound and the parents sold a house and the kids had some money and you combine the money, you could easily have your own house, your tiny house, which, for a lot of people, offers them, more privacy, not as close as the basement or the apartment upstairs, actually their own little house. So I think that's just a great idea. If I was going to do this, that's what I want. I want myself a nice little tiny house out in the backyard.
Yeah.
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 And they're very cool.
Yeah. There was one guy, and he lived in it. It was like his property. He went and bought one of those little sheds from Home Depot, and it was just like the shell of the shed, and he put it on the property. And because it was, below so many square footage, it didn't have to be permitted or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. I didn't investigate any further.
Right.
But he finished out his little shed, and that, it had a little kitchenette. It had a little, futon couch for his living room, and then it had his bed, and he had a very tiny bathroom, and that was all he needed. So, that's another thing you can do too.
Yeah, they're very cool. And the idea of being able to do a modular home in a tiny house style, and the cost is so much less. And you know what, and some of them even come a couple of bedrooms, some of these modular ones will come, 2 bedrooms. So they're not really that super tiny when you think about it. Some of them are really tiny. Some of them are like, 500 square feet, and you're climbing ladders to go up to bed and stuff like that. But then there are others that are 2 bedrooms that are probably just a little bit smaller than some of those 55 and older houses. But they're tiny houses. And I think that's relatively new, a phenomenon. They obviously haven't been around that long, but I think that's a great option. If you have the land, then everybody's got their own space. And I think it's a great option. You can go to grandma's house, but grandma's in the backyard.
In your granny garage.
In my granny garage.
That's right. Where is Grandma? She's right out there picking tomatoes.
That's right, picking tomatoes. That's correct. Well, my other grandmother lived around the corner when I was a kid. So I would have to walk around the corner and to go get the tomato and the basil and the mint and all that. She did have a garden, but I have to walk around the corner. Now you can't let your kid walk around the corner.
No. Not unless you have an Apple AirTag on them.
Right. Yes.
So I guess to sum this up, because some of the things that we're talking about are the kind of speculative, communities being built specifically for multi-generational families. However they might lay out, it might be 2 buildings, on the same properties as you were talking about, or properties that are being built and specifically designed so that generational families can live on the same floor, on multiple floors, duplex homes, lots of different ways to look at it. And even though it's relatively new as an idea, it is an idea that we are seeing more and more of, and that we will see more and more of, with respect to people wanting to and needing to live in that kind of way, which is not an unpleasant thought. You know, being around, our kids, when they were teenagers, they were no more fun than we were when we were teenagers for our parents. But then they grow up, and then they have kids, and
Mhm.
being separate and everybody having separate lives is important, but still being able to share the things that you share. Like you and your husband want to go out, and you've got a ready-made babysitter who wants to be with the kids.
Yep.
All of those things, socially, culturally, and financially come to play. And so I think, and this is something, Stephanie, more and more as you're talking with people who are looking at houses and looking at the physical configuration of the homes that they're buying, unless they're buying, a 1 or 2 bedroom condo in a condo complex, talking to people about, what's your plan? Are you buying this house so that you can own this home for a couple of years, sell it, go buy a bigger one, sell it, go buy a bigger one? Well, that's one plan. And a lot of people do that. It's how they grow their real estate wealth. And it's also how they are able to grow their space. But there are a lot of people who buy a house, and they buy much more house than they need today because their vision is them, their kids, and maybe their parents down the road when they retire and move here from wherever they are, anywhere from South Georgia to California.
Mhm.
Is that something you think that as real estate professionals need to be keeping in mind as we're talking to home buyers and home sellers that have the physical space that would work, to help them think and plan for that kind of marketing and that kind of buying? How would you approach that?
Absolutely. I mean, if for a buyer, for instance, if I'm taking them into a home and it's not specific where it's a house with a finished basement, but it's a space that would be big enough for them to be multi-generational, it's, kind of my job to think outside the box and give them those ideas, especially if it falls within their price point of the home that they're looking for. Because, finished basements, obviously that's additional square footage, which can raise the value of the house, which also goes into the pricing. So it's important for us as real estate professionals to think outside the box and show possibilities for a home, even if it's not specifically laid out for multi-generational living.
Yeah, I agree. It's really important to just bring this to their attention.
Mhm.
They might not have children. They might not be married. They might, all of those questions you need to throw out to people to make them think about, this is the most expensive purchase they're going to make, right? So it's a really good idea, and you're really supposed to throw all of this stuff out for them to think about. They didn't throw anything out at us when we bought this house. And it's only by the grace of God that we ended up in a good school district, because we had no kids. We were never going to have kids. And we just wanted a basement. And so this realtor did nothing. And we just ended up in a fabulous school district by the grace of God. So it's real important to throw those questions out. So get people thinking. If they make a decision after you said what you said, at least you've given them the information that they need to think about before they make the purchase.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and yeah, houses that are on full basements, whether they're finished or not, they are, if the main floor of a house is 13 or 1400 square feet, and the second floor of the house is another 900 or 1000 square feet, and the basement is the same square footage as the main floor,
Right.
1,500 square foot apartment.
Right.
Well, heck, that's a 2 bedroom, 2 bath house if you wanted it to be
Yeah,
that way.
absolutely.
So there's a lot of attractiveness to what those kind of homes could be made into.
Mhm.
The only thing that people have to keep in mind is that, and I've run into this, is where somebody has a house, they've turned the basement into an in-law suite, and they put a great deal of money in it. And now they no longer need the in-law suite. Family life has changed, and they want to sell the home, but they want to sell the home with this in-law suite for 50 or 75 or $100,000 more than all of the other homes on basements in that community will sell for. And the house won't appraise, even though you've got an extra kitchen and, you know, bathroom and bedroom down on the main floor. It's still perceived as a finished basement. So, looking at it, at least right now, and I think that's going to change as more and more there are people that are doing those sorts of things in living expenses. But for just right now, keeping in mind the cost factors and how long you're going to use it for.
Mhm.
My parents, they're 60. They, they're retired. We're going to all move in together, and they all might live in that house for another 25 years. They'll get 100% of the cost that they put into that house out of that house over 25 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the value of the house will have matured,
Mhm.
over 25 years. So lots of different things that we as real estate professionals need to keep in mind. And particularly, I think, you have this conversation with the lenders that you work with or the contractors that we work with, um, and get them to be thinking about what this kind of property would be and what the
Mhm.
valuation of it might be. We don't have those kind of talks with them right now, do we?
Mm-mm.
No.
No. I think it's something that probably going to be a good idea to put on the table over the course of the next couple of years, because all of us can buy one big house walking distance away from Pigs and Peaches. What else do you need in life?
I mean, that's the selling point in itself, Ira. So
True, true, true.
Oh my God. That's so
So,
funny.
okay, so I guess to kind of sum it up, really, yes, it's not a fad, but a trend. Yes, it's something that we're not seeing every single day, but seeing more and more of. That it is being shifted and changed because of economics and cultural changes to the communities that we all live in. And that it's something that we absolutely, as real estate professionals, as we talk to you, home buyers and sellers, need to bring to your attention and for us to all keep in mind, because it is a factor that may not be for you, but it may be when you own a home, a factor for the people that when you want to sell your house, people who are searching for homes would be interested in, and becomes a selling value and a selling factor for.
Mhm.
Anything else anybody want to kind of throw in over the fence for something that still has, you know, a lot of newness to it and nobody knows everything?
I just think that it's going to become more prevalent.
Mhm.
And I think that a lot of it is going to be because of the economics that we live in. We are so different than we were in the 1950s, and that in the 1960s. So people double, wife and husband both work, children daycare. I mean, the cost of childcare is ridiculous. I mean, there are parents that choose not to go to work because their whole salary is going to childcare. So all of these things, which weren't like that I don't even think it was like that in the 60s or the 70s. But it's like that now, and it's not going to, prices aren't going to drop. Prices are only going to go up. So I think that the economics are going to push this to be much more prevalent than now than before.
And I guess just for me, um, maybe because last generation and not this generation, um, growing up in the house with my aunt and uncle was terrific. Um, you know, uh, just if it was just nothing but the food, because my aunt Myra was Irish and cooked all of these wonderful Irish meals. And so we would just love to run downstairs and have dinner or lunch with Auntie Myra, because what we were eating upstairs was because my parents were from Lithuania and Russia. We were eating the same Eastern European food day in and day out, and they had a dog and we didn't. And they would tolerate us being pains in the necks and my parents wouldn't. All those wonderful things that having that older generation in the house, it just made it a lot more fun and a lot more pleasing to grow up in a house where there was more than two people, somebody you could run, Uncle Jack, please, my mother's going to put me when he finds out that I did whatever I did. Drew used crayons to draw on the wall that he just painted.
That's true.
Right. So I think there's a lot to be said for the more things change, the more they stay the same. That this is one of the aspects of cultural life in this country and in this region, because the South is known for it being a very family-oriented region.
Absolutely.
Kids grew up and they moved to 10 different towns. They may live out, they lived on a farm, they lived on 20 acres, they lived, more rurally. And there were cousins and aunts and grandparents and sisters and brothers all around them. And then Sundays, everybody gathered together if they hadn't seen each other all week, and they go to church and have dinner.
Yep.
Right. So it's not something that's foreign to the Southern culture for sure. It's something that has just changed, that I think there's a great benefit that might be coming to us.
Agreed.
Yep. So something for us to all think about and to look forward to. So we're going to wrap this up today. But before we do, Stephanie M., just give us a quick rundown of some of the things that you talked about earlier, some of the fun things that we can do, starting with
Pigs
and peaches.
Yes. Okay. Starting with Pigs and Peaches Barbecue Festival, Kennesaw, Georgia, this weekend, 15th and 16th. Starts at 6 p.m. on Friday, and Saturday it starts at 10 a.m. Food, music, crafts. It's great. Check it out. August 23rd to the 24th in Grant Park in Atlanta. Summer Shade Festival. Free to attend, live music, artists, food, Kids Zone, a 5K race. Check it out, August the 23rd to the 24th. An ongoing show that just opened at the Telescience Museum called Fury, the Power of Nature. It's going to run through January. Again, this is all about an interactive hands-on exhibit exploring natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunami. I mean, it just sounds like so much fun. I think we need to bring the girls. I think they'd have a ball. Going on at the Telus Museum in Cartersville. And when you go up in that direction, check out Red Top Mountain State Park in Cartersville. That's right on Lake Allatoona. And you can go up there. You can get a cabin. You can get a yurt. You can go camping in a camp. You can go swimming. You can go hiking. You can go fishing. And so you could have a nice little weekend trip, not a lot of money and not far from Atlanta. And that's at Red Top Mountain State Park, also on Lake Allatoona in Cartersville.
All right.
And then I told you a little bit about the active adult community, the senior centers. Again, every city that you live in, if you look it up online, you're going to find the senior center. All right. And the ones that I just talked about, well, there's one in Woodstock on Arnold Mill Road, and there's another one in Alpharetta on Cogburn Road. There's one in Cobb right near us off of Sandy Plains Road. $25 a month. You can play games. You can play mahjong. You can play bingo. You can have fitness classes, Tai Chi, arts and crafts, painting classes, ceramics, trips. Go to the Yellow Daisy Festival. Again, you just have to be over 50, so it's not really, old. It's over 50. For $25, you can take part in any of these activities. So again, check that out. And that kind of fed into what we were talking about today. And that's what I had for this week.
So cool. So want to thank everybody for joining us again this week on ATL Home Market. We like to explore ideas that aren't necessarily the things that everybody are talking about, trends like we talked about today, as well as to really dig into the practicality of the needs that people have when they're buying and selling homes and all of its different aspects. And that's what we talk about week in and week out, and try to have a little bit of fun doing it. One of the things I will tell you is that pretty much most of the things that Stephanie recommends on a weekly basis, at one time or another over the last number of years, we participated in pretty much all of them, whether it was ourselves or with our kids or our grandkids. So we're not just kind of pulling stuff out. Like I said, barbecue is terrific, and it's terrific in Kennesaw as well as it's terrific in McDonough. But you got to have a great festival to do it, and so we do. So again, I want to thank you for joining us. If you have any questions or any information that you would like to get about any of the things that we talked about today, or if you'd like to talk to any of us individually, talk to Stephanie G about how she can help you to plan what you're thinking about doing, whether you're buying or selling a home. All you need to do is call us or text us at the numbers you see here in our YouTube channel. And if you'd like any information or any special reports that we have about any of the topics that we've talked about, just let us know, and we'll be happy to email them to you as well. So if you like what you heard, check off that you liked it, and we would appreciate that. And if you're just visiting us for the first time, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot of great information and ideas and stories and programs that we talk about that would be really super helpful, and actually in some cases a lot of fun for you as you're thinking about buying or selling homes. So on behalf of Stephanie G and Stephanie M, I'm Ira Miskin with your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the Miskin team. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.